Hello and welcome to the Workwise for Screen podcast, created to help our screen industries better look after all the people their businesses depend on.
And stay on safe legal ground. It's part of a growing collection of practical resources and guidance that you can dip into without it taking you forever or costing you anything. It's supported by the BFI, awarding national lottery funding.
We'll be talking with people across production, distribution and exhibition, animation, VFX and gaming about the challenges to well-being we face when deadlines and budgets are tight, and how, most importantly, to improve things. We are your hosts, Tasita Small from the Small HR Company, the HR for Entertainment one,
and Keith Arrowsmith, the legal one, a creative industries solicitor and program director for Workwise for Screen. Welcome to the Workwise for Screen podcast. On this episode, we're delving into the tax rules and regulations for screen businesses. We'll focus on the way the tax rules deal with freelancers and employees. It can and does to many feel very complicated. However, there's no getting round the tax rules, and it's crucial to stay on top of them, especially if you don't want to face penalties further down the line. As ever, we don't know every listener's specific circumstances, so we can only provide general guidance to introduce this subject. You may need to talk through your situation with a specialist before making any final decisions. Erin Walls is an accountant with WallsMan Creative, an accountancy firm for the creative industries. Erin is an ACA working with businesses and individuals in the creative sectors. Providing accountancy, tax and business advice, she assists her clients with enhancing performance and growth. WallsMan Creative are experienced film accountants and work across the screen industry, helping with specialist tax claims, job costing and profitability reviews. Let's speak to Erin now.
When freelancers are thinking about tax and accounts, I think there's two things that come up. One is, what sort of expenses can I put through? And does that matter what sort of format I'm in business in? And the other is limited companies. Like when should I look at limited company? And also as a freelancer, sometimes when I go to get jobs, sometimes some of the companies say, oh, well, we only work with limited companies. So then people come and say, do I need to be a limited company? Can I not? So sometimes there's a choice and sometimes there isn't a choice.
So let's work out why that might be. Sometimes it's called a limited company. Sometimes people talk about a personal service company or a special purpose vehicle or a loan out company. What's the idea behind seeking to work through a company?
The two most obvious reasons is one, there's lower tax rates. So as a self-employed person, you pay income tax rates, which are the highest tax rates. But in a company, you can take your payment in form of dividend, which are the lower tax rates. But it's not that straightforward because you have to be earning enough money to use those tax rates to save the money to make it worthwhile. So under a certain threshold of earnings, if you set up a limited company, it's actually a very expensive way to operate. So people need to, make sure they're in the right area. And then the other reason it crops up for freelancers is because sometimes they go for a job interview and they get told that's fine, but we will only work with you if you're a limited company.
And why would that be? Why would a production company prefer to only work with other companies?
So it basically all centers around IR35, which basically is HMRC trying to make sure that companies aren't presenting people as though they're not employees just so that they can avoid the cost of an employee and not pay employers' NI or pension contributions or whatever. So is this person, should they really be an employee? Like, is this the situation or not? And so one of the ways that companies feel like they can protect themselves from that is say, I'm not taking on an individual person. This is a contract between two companies. It doesn't actually always work because HMRC will look at the specific details of the contract and the work, and they can override whatever is written if they think it's still a sort of a play, if you see what I mean. But But a lot of the time, companies will just say, look, if you're a limited company, then we feel like we're not taking the risk, essentially.
Does it help to know whether this thing called IR35 applies or doesn't apply? Is that the test that we're looking to kind of get to the bottom of today?
Yeah, so it's not whether it applies or not. That's the thing. So people think, oh, I've got a contract that says I'm clearly a contractor or I'm a freelancer, so it doesn't apply to me. That's not how it works. It's literally like, it's really holistic. So HMRC will come and look at a person, or maybe they'll start with the company, but they'll pick out an individual and they'll look at the terms of the way that person works. So I might be employed with you as a contractor, so I'm not on your payroll, and I think that I'm self-employed. I've come to you for a job for 6 months. That's perfectly fine as a contractor. But HMRC would look at lots of different things. So, for example, if I ring in sick one day and I say I can't come today, do you wait for me to come back to work, or do you call up another contractor and say, come and do this work today? Do I have a company email address, for example, so that when I work for you and I speak to your clients, I email from Erin at your company name as opposed to my freelance name? Do I use my own MacBook or laptop, or do you provide that for me? Do I do the same set hours? Like, there's lots of different individual things that they will look at to see if overall, does it look like this person is an employee? And the reason it's complicated is because I could have, say, 3 contracts on the go. One where I work for a person like every Monday, one where I just do a few hours here and there, and one where I work every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in the same place, whatever. Just because I think I'm a contractor, it doesn't mean those all are treated as, freelance contracts by HMRC. In fact, they could look at me and say, actually, the Monday one looks like it's a freelance situation, and the odd hours ones looks like it's a freelance situation. But this one where you do Thursday, Friday, Saturday every week at this person's, site or whatever, that one specifically, we think you look like an employee. So they literally will go to each individual engagement. It's not even just on, everything you do. It could be one of them that qualifies and one doesn't. So it is tricky.
And if we get it wrong, if we've been thinking about that relationship between the two businesses as a freelance arrangement, a contracting arm's length arrangement, and it turns out that HMR thinks it's an employee relationship, is that a problem, or do we just sort it out with the paperwork?
So the problem is tax. The reason HMRC are looking at it is because they think that you've been presented as a freelancer rather than an employee, and therefore the company isn't paying employers NI. And there may be other things like, as an employee, you should have a workplace pension or something like that. But essentially, they're looking at national insurance contribution and the tax that they think the company should be paying on this employee, which you're not. So it's sort of split roughly into 2 levels. Like, bigger companies, the responsibility is on the company. So if you work for like the BBC, for example, they will have a policy that says, we have to employ you, or you have this thing called off payroll working, where you're sort of treated, it looks like you're an employee, you're paid monthly via the payroll, but you're not actually an employee, you don't get all the benefits. And then the smaller end of the market, where it's much harder for a small company to put all these processes in place, they tend to look at the individual to make the decision. So they should know which one they are. There is an online test that you can take on the government website, and it just asks you loads of questions and you answer them all. And at the end it says, we think you're this, or we think you're that. And that gives you a guide. You could have done that and gone, oh, it said I was freelance, so therefore I think I'm okay. And that would be your defense type thing. But yeah, a lot of the time it just depends what HMRC find when they look at the situation. And it can be hard. A lot of people will find that their situation is grey. It's not a clear cut one or the other. So that's why people are a bit nervous about it, because you're not sure. Essentially, it's the tax that should have been paid, the NI, that HMRC would be after if they think that it's the wrong situation.
And can I make good just by paying the NI? Is that sorted if I just sort of make good by paying the NI later?
Yeah, so it depends on like the volume, I guess, the size of the issue, and how long it's been going on for. If it's something quite small, like in the current year, and it was quite grey, then they would probably just agree to that. If they think it's been going on for a long time, the sort of values involved are quite significant, and they think it was very obvious case, for example, that it was very clear that you were an employee and this has been done purposely, then they might go down the route of fines and interest on the tax.
So I can see why it might be a good idea to go to the HMRC website and go through that questionnaire. But you said it only gives you a guide. To even if we go through that process, do I get to a clear, certain answer by going through the online questionnaire?
So, well, it does give you an answer. It does say, based on what you've said, I think that you are, an employee or you are a contractor. The downside is that it is obviously only going to put out an answer based on your answers to its questions. And some people will read a question a different way. So you may read a question and answer it believing you're giving the right answer, but that's not actually the right answer, or you've misunderstood the question. So sometimes people they do go through the test, they get a response, they think that they're okay, and then when HMRC come and have a look at it, they go, well, no, this question here, you said this, and actually that's not the case.
Tricky. So how do we help a production company take a line that reduces that risk of being challenged later on? Is it a case of going to that HMRC website and following it to the letter, or do you have other techniques that might help people feel a little bit more comfortable with this tricky arrangement?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be 100% sure, the larger companies literally don't take the risk at all. And like I said, they will either force you to be an employee or they'll put you on this off payroll working stuff, which is like a hybrid scenario. But it means that NI is being counted for. So there's no comeback. They're covering their back. For large organizations, that's fine. They can afford to do that. It tends to be the smaller or the medium-sized companies that don't want to have to pay that if they don't have to, that will be the ones pushing for a contractor relationship. Um, Now, you can, of course, for every contract, you can go online and do the test to try and have something to back it up. And lots of people will do that so that if HMRC come, they say, this is the contract, this is our understanding, and this is our check that we did on your website that confirmed us. So that's a really good way of doing it. It doesn't always hold ground, like I said, because it could be that they argue that the question's been answered the wrong way, but it's a very good place to start. Um, Otherwise, it's literally just looking at the contract and trying to pull it to pieces. Does this person have other contracts? So this isn't their only contract. They're also working here, there, and the other. That also sort of shows a person is a true contractor. Whereas though if I'm working 2 days a week with your company, that's all I do. I have no other income, and I do the same 2 days a week. That looks less like a contractor and more like an employment situation. There's no magical tick box apart from just paying the tax just so that you're clear. Otherwise, it is lots of little things, which is why it is a problem area, because most companies don't want to just pay the tax to be sure. They'd rather not pay it if they don't have to, and then you run the risk of possibly HMRC coming in and asking questions.
And for a small production company, insisting that all of their contractors work through a limited company might not give the production company the comfort that they think they're getting.
Yeah, I mean, lots of companies do that, and a lot of the time it won't be a problem. But I guess the way of looking at it again is that if you have just offered someone a contract and then made them set up a limited company to work with you, but they're only working with you, they do set hours, and everything about what they're doing looks like an employee, it's that situation is still there. You haven't taken it away. You've just put, some what you consider some legal protections in place.
So looking forward, do you have a feel for what we should keep on the table for a production company to help them feel comfortable with this distinction between freelancing and using employees? What's the thing that we ought to just keep focus on?
Okay, so I think if in any doubt, always have a look at the government checklist, the test you can go through, because wrongly or rightly, it shows that you've considered it. and you thought about it and you've tried to do the right thing. So if nothing else, they can't come and go, you purposely didn't do this, because you can say, look, we did everything we knew how to do. If you have got the resource and you have got someone in the team that understands it, you could go through your contracts and look at the individual things, like whose equipment are they using? Do they contact the clients? Have they got our website address on there? Lots of little things. You could do that. But again, at the smaller end of the market, that's quite heavy resource and so open to opinion that it might be not even a worthwhile task to do. So I think having the conversation so that both parties are aware that there is a potential risk, at least you're aware of it, doing the little checklist so that you've tried to cover your back as far as possible. And then I think that's, without getting involved, like bringing in a lawyer or bringing in tax advisors or something, that's as far as you can go to keep the cost and the time on this as low as possible. If you're really worried about it, then you would possibly bring in a lawyer or a tax advisor or go through the contract terms and literally go through each thing to make sure whether you think it is. But it's slightly unrealistic, I think, for most small companies, small production companies. You wouldn't have the budget, the time, the resource to do something like that. And there's no guarantee at the end of it that you get a definite 100% correct outcome anyway. So I think most people, it's just about having the conversation, being aware that there is a potential risk, and then doing the sort of quick things you can to try and offset it, which would probably be the HMRC test.
It's incredibly complicated and people do get worried about it without understanding what the real risks are. So thank you ever so much, Erin, to kind of introduce it in a very kind of practical and pragmatic way. But the thing I reflect on is you need to keep revisiting this, because although the contract wording might remain the same, the actual circumstances around it might change very, very quickly.
Yeah, totally. Especially as some people are given a contract for like 3 months or something, and then it rolls and they're there 2 years later. Like, that is obviously a very different scenario to what that initial 3-month contract was covering. So it is an ongoing thing that needs to be looked at.
Erin has really helped make sure that we all understand that what on the face of it looks like a kind of relationship that we have with any particular person might not be what we expect. And that feels really uncomfortable, because in business we like certainty and we like consistency. But the tax rules need flexibility. And sometimes it's not what we say or what the individual says, but it's what the HMRC rules and regulations say about that relationship. In any event, if we can show that as a business we're having that conversation with the people that we want to join our team, that at least we've got that kind of sense of doing the right thing, having some flexibility, going through the tests to make sure that we've considered how they apply to this particular scenario and we keep it under review, then we can go on and talk about the proper rate of pay for that particular arrangement. None of it's easy, lots of it's nuanced, but we have got some guidance on the platform around PAYE and NIC for employees, what that means for IR35 and that definition of a freelancer. And we've got that link back to the HMRC checklist so that you can go through the process and record the outcomes just in case someone asks you that question in the future. Thanks for listening to the Workwise for Screen podcast, supported by the BFI awarding National Lottery funding.
Our online platform provides lots of easy to understand information and invites to our events. Visit our website at workwiseforscreen.org.uk and register for the latest updates.
Please follow us on social media and join in this crucial conversation.
and contact us with suggestions for future episodes, or if you can, support the programme in any other way. This podcast is produced by 1860. Music is by Benjamin Squires.